Tony D and Little Joan with a final video. I couldn't do the video I wanted to do because it was a subject matter, and I can't do the Piney podcast now. It's kind of too late. So I thought I'd just do one on an article, interesting article I read on Zerohedge. It's called Has Feminism and Hoeflation Destroyed Dating in the West? It kind of has. Kind of has. I have some personal experience. Um, I'm luckier, though, than most because the women in my age category aren't totally insufferable about feminism. They're from an era of a different kind of feminism where they're like, I'm my own person kind of thing, and I have a job and I have my own house or whatever. But it seems like the younger women, they are like crazy, like at a level of crazy I've never seen before. And I always thought women were kind of crazy. So there's some interesting stats in this article. The first one you should know, ladies, if you don't know, more than 50% of American women are still childless by 30. By age 35, fertility goes in steep decline, with women having a 15% chance of becoming pregnant and less than 5% chance of motherhood at age 40. And all over the internet, like, I usually set my age parameters, like, I'll have it at 35 to 65. I know that's kind of a big thing, but I like to look at some of the younger women once in a while. And what I'll notice is you'll see a lot of women 38, 39. They want to have a baby. Oh, yeah. They want children, and they're looking for a husband. They're scrambling, man. It's like glong, glong, glong. That biological clock is ticking. And look at the odds. They've waited too long, in my opinion. They might get lucky, but yeah. The time to get a baby is in your 20s, when you're still young enough to have it. And what the article talks about is the female happiness paradox. That feminism suggested you should spend your 20s building a career, but really, it doesn't make women happy. For men, it's happy. It's a happy time, even though they're sacrificing for their families, but they're building something, and men feel they need purpose. We need purpose in our lives. And by having a wife and having a kid, you're forced to buckle down, you're forced to get a job and pay for the kid. Unfortunately, women are like, oh no, F that. Or, hey, yeah, you gotta not only go to work and make all the money, but you should help me around the house. It's like, no, it depends on what your situation is. If you're both working, that's a different story. But, it's not fair that a guy has to work all day and then he has to come home and do your job too. And I get it. Moms are 24/7 to some extent, and it doesn't feel good to be the maid, but that's kind of your role in the relation. It doesn't feel good to work, and women are unfortunately finding that out, but they get caught up in this. So over 63% of men under the age of 30 are now single. That's up from 51% in 2019, because men are just done with you, ladies. I see a lot of tweets on Twitter from guys, and they're like, one was something like, I think it was from Don the Second, in fact, one of my followers. And he said something like, guys, are you pursuing a relationship, or are you just on the grind? And a lot of guys were just like, no, man, I'm just doing the grind. So in other words, I'm just building up my life. I don't need a relationship to drag me down. And that's what I think the new women have become. They've become a drag. So I don't want to get into my very personal experience, but I see that in even some of the women close to my age. And, it's expensive to take women out and go do stuff. And women are complaining you're not spending enough money. And at the same time, they're like, well, I want somebody who's in love with me and I want to make a connection and all this stuff. But then you make it about money. And girls in their 20s seem to be obsessed with it. Utterly obsessed. Like more so than ever. Back in my day, when I was in my 20s, if women talked this way, they did it amongst themselves in more anonymous climes, I'll say. I'm sure they talked about it somewhat, but you know, there wasn't this idea that you would bang every guy up and down the boulevard and then, you know, finally in your when you're looking down the barrel of 35, you say, okay, now one of you guys can take care of me. I've had my fun. Like even Charlize Theron said in an interview that she had a great guy, but she wanted to go out and experience life and live the world. And then later, I think she adopted kids, and now she's a single mom and she can't get a guy to marry her. Gee, I wonder why. What guy who had, and keep in mind, there's no way Charlize is going to marry, say, a guy like me who's stone cold broke. She's going to want a guy who makes more money than her, that can take care of her, because that's what women want, even women who are already rich. How many guys are like that? Now, you think a guy, you basically have to be, if not a multimillionaire, a billionaire. What billionaire is going to shack up with Charlize Theron when he could get some 25-year-old hot piece of A who will basically do anything he wants, at least for the next 10 years or so, till she gets wise and divorces him for money? I mean, you can't have it both ways, lady. You can't be like, I mean, a total, again, Hoeflation, and then suddenly say, well, now I'm ready to be loyal and settle down. It just doesn't work that way. Women aren't wired that way. It's not good for your psyche. For men, they can kind of do it because we're kind of wired that way. And I'm not suggesting it's a good thing either. I didn't particularly do that. I mean, I've been with a few, but it's not like I'm not like one of those guys who just like bangs girls and then says adios. So it's I don't think most guys are, because yeah, maybe in your 20s a little bit, but eventually I think most guys like to be in a relationship because they don't have to concentrate on dating anymore. Because dating is stressful and it's expensive. And dating with your significant other is different. You kind of got some leeway there, you know? As long as you're together and you're having fun, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Yeah, once in a while you spend money on it. And you know the times you're going to spend money, so you can plan for it. You know it's going to be Valentine's Day, birthdays, anniversaries, stuff like that. But what this shows is that dating app research shows that 80% of Western women are chasing after the top 20% or less of men, earning potential being the biggest factor next to physical attractiveness. A recent viral trend on social media in which women made a list of restaurants they would refuse to eat at on the first date exemplifies the concept of Hoeflation. The Cheesecake Factory was mentioned as a red flag by cheap men. Spending up to $200 or more was presented as the bare minimum for a first date. You think I'm going to spend $200 on you on a first date? You're out of your mind. Out of your mind. I don't spend that kind of money on a first date. That is a good date. That is like I'm in a relationship, I'm already getting laid date. That's like a anniversary date, or I'm trying to impress you date. You don't blow that kind of money on the first date. Jesus, what's Valentine's Day? A trip to Hawaii? That's crazy. That's crazy. What feminism has done, according to the article, essentially is hyper-exaggerate women's natural inclination to seek out more productive men, while also hyper-exaggerating their sense of self-worth to make them insufferable. Yeah, and I think that's bled into the other generations too. Now, most of the women my age aren't like that, but I could see some of the influence, especially in some of the bios. Some of the bios are just so insufferable. You know, you might see like a hot girl and go, "Oh, she's pretty nice," and then you read the bio and you just go, "Oh God, no, no." Um, so yeah, it should be noted that Hoeflation seems to be directly linked to progressive influences, and not all women fall into this category. Unfortunately, around 71% of young women identify with progressive beliefs, as opposed to young men who are only 53% progressive. It should be noted that progressive today means something a lot different from what it meant in the 1990s. Progressive now means woke or extreme leftist cultism. So yeah, yeah, and once in a while I'll turn down the age to look at some of the girls in their 20s, and they are smoking hot, but they are GD nuts. And I feel bad for you guys out there. I really do. Um, and even getting married, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I know that are divorced. I mean, it's ridiculous. Very few people I know stay together. You know, it's sad. It's really sad. And some of the cases, you can see that the wives regret the divorce in their own way. I know of one in particular, and it's sad, you know, especially if you have kids, to get divorced. Most of my older relatives, they're from generations they just didn't get divorced. They got married relatively young, in their 20s, and they stayed together, you know, all their lives, which was, it was a shock to me when people my age started getting divorced, because I thought, oh, well, I'm in that world. I'm not going to get divorced, but I did. And I just think it's feminism. I mean, it seems to be the driving force. That feminism wasn't really about women. It was about getting back at men. It was about getting back at men and competing with men in a realm that they shouldn't have really tried to compete at. Because again, women are different. They're not in our realm. It doesn't mean they can't do the same things we do. It doesn't mean there aren't certain women who they're just on the end of the bell curve and they act more like men. Some women are. But most women are happier in women type roles. That's why so many women are nurses. Do you know how many women are nurses? My God, the dating apps are full of nurses and teachers, mostly of younger kids. And that's kind of where they like to be. They like to be nurturing. They like to do jobs that give them an opportunity to help people. They like to be social workers and advocates and things like that. And I don't hold it against them. But when you have women who insist, no, I can do this job, and then they get the job because they're a woman and because they push for it, well, there's not enough women here. There should be more women. And then they get there and then they don't do as good. You got to say, like, what the hell, man? What the hell, woman? You are the one who wanted this job and said women could do it, and then you couldn't do it. Kathleen Kennedy, I think, being the prime example of currently today. So, I don't know if any women ever listen to my podcast. I know a handful of you do. But most of the ones that do, I think, already don't need this lecture. The feminists are the ones who need the lecture, unfortunately. And until they hit rock bottom, until the trend changes, I don't think this is going to change anytime soon. The trend has to change. It's starting to change when trad wives are going to become a thing, and hopefully they stay a thing for a while, or at least long enough. But that's the thing about guys, too. I think we're very gun shy about trusting you again. And that's a real problem in a relationship. You need trust. I think the laws have to change, especially with family court and regarding divorce. So when women divorce you, you don't get your butt handed to you. I was fortunate. I didn't have any money to begin with, so there was nothing to take. But a lot of other guys, you know, imagine you marry someone and you spend 10, 20 years having kids and building a life, and then you get divorced and you lose it all. It's not fair. It's not fair that a man who works for his family then has to support his family and then try to rebuild his life when his wife's the one who checks out. You know, he should support his kids, don't get me wrong, but it's the wife the wife should go back to work if she wants that life. And unfortunately, I think a lot of women pull that trigger on the divorce, and then they get divorced, and then they're even more unhappy, and they can't. There's been a million cases on Reddit of women saying that, by the way. So you should really think hard before you listen to your divorced friends who are, oh, I'm so happy now. Now that I'm divorced, I'm banging all these guys, and I've never been happier, and they treat me like a queen, and blah, blah, blah. They're not going to treat you like a queen when you're old. No. No, that's when the queen train dies. That's when you're like, yeah, you can't get arrested. You know, again, I'm not one of these Lotharios on the interwebs, but I've been in the dating app world for a while, and it's just like, these women expect a lot. And I think, you know, it's fine if you had to get divorced because you just weren't getting along and it was driving you crazy, but I think the bar has been set so low now, it's nearly impossible to please a lot of these women. And they should really stick it out. If you're married, you should stick it out as long as you can. I mean, I get it. There are sometimes irreconcilable differences. You realize, oh my God, we never should have gotten married. That can happen. I get it. But when you got kids, you should stick it out. At least until the kids are older. And you shouldn't take your ex to the cleaners. There are exceptions, of course, but I think part of the deal with women is they tend to think with their feelings, and in the heat of the moment, they go, I'm going to show him. And then they do, and then they're kind of overcommitted to what they've done, and they can't back out of it. So if we changed the laws a little bit and made divorce more fair, you know, made it, I don't know, you can't just get all the money and not work. You just can't. That has to change. You can't sit on your butt collecting a paycheck and just cleaning a house after you made such a mess of everything. In other countries, the divorce is like you get a couple of grand and then they send you on your way. And that's it. That's it. And again, I'm not saying for the kids. That's different. But I know guys who have gotten custody of the kids and they're still paying the wives. You know, and if the wives cheat, I think that should be a factor. So too with the men. If you cheat, there should be a fine. There should be a fine for cheaters, especially in a divorce. That means you lose the divorce, in my view, for cheaters. And if that's not a factor, then what's the point of all this? And I think that's why men, you know, see that. Men see the logic in that. If I don't even have a monogamous relationship when I'm married, if my wife can sleep around and lie to me and steal all the money and it doesn't matter, and by the way, that's the case in a no-fault divorce state like New Jersey, then yeah, you can see why a lot of men just say, oh yeah, we're not getting married. And that's very sad for a lot of women. Because some of those women are good people and they just want to get married and have kids and they will stay loyal. But that uncertainty makes it rough on them. And, you know, if their guys do something stupid, well, they might say, oh, well, you did something stupid. Well, now I'll screw you. So anyhow, I don't know what the solution is. It says here things are just probably going to bottom out until, you know, a couple of generations go by. But again, I think it could be the death of a trend in the making. You know, if trad wives become a thing, and maybe the media gets on board with that at some point, maybe after Trump wins and things really change, possibly. I don't know. We'll have to see. 2024, I got my fingers crossed. So I hope you have a happy new year. It's now 2024. This is technically my first video of 2024. So I hope you'll tune into my channel. I hope you'll buy my books at Amazon. Check out the Pineys, books 1 through 13, available at Amazon.com. And I hope we all have a wonderful year. Check out my live stream where we counted down the New Year's, and we got to see the giant blueberry drop in Hamilton. So I was glad I could find a live clip of that. All right, that's it for me. We'll see you